talking with one of the best scorers in the history of lacrosse, either indoor or outdoor. Tom Marechek, one of the most decorated players, four-time All-American at Syracuse, first team honors in 90, 91, 92, helped the Orange to two national championships, six-time USCLA All-Star. We'll get into that conversation about the old days, about most kids think about the NLL and the MLL. Played for the Wings, played for the Bayhawks, an indoor career from Victoria. First of all, Tom, thank you for taking the time out to talk to us. So you're talking to us from Georgia. And we're going to talk a little bit about lacrosse. So thanks for joining us.
No, thanks, Greg. Thanks for putting this together. Very excited to talk to you.
I got it. The simplest question of all I want to ask is the nickname Hollywood. I'm just curious where that starts with, and then we'll get into the specifics. But where does that come from?
As a young kid, I was one of six kids growing up, the youngest by far, and I listened to music growing up. I had my one sister who loved disco. My other sister loved rock and roll. My brother was kind of in the middle, in between. He loved everything. My dad obviously loved the old Nat King Cole and Johnny Mathis. And I just loved music. I sang all the time, always in a good mood, I guess. My mom said, in diapers, singing. And I carried that on through my career. In the locker room, on the bus, on the plane. I sang a lot, and that and probably my flashiness, my flashy play of lacrosse brought me the name Hollywood.
I remember watching you, and I think behind the back passes, you were the first one to really use that as a staple as part of that offense. Is that fair?
Yeah. I didn't grow up using my opposite hand. We never had to, as you know, in Canada. We're on the left side if you're a righty, right side if you're a lefty. Didn't really have to switch hands. Looking back now, Greg, I wish I did learn to shoot. I think I did score maybe 8 left-handed goals in my whole career. And that was a lot of years just only scoring 8. And but my behind the back was obviously my signature shot. And that came not from one day. That came out from 1,000 days of practicing it in my driveway with a tennis ball on a 4x4 box goal every day.
Keep telling kids nowadays that instead of going away for a weekend and playing travel, if they just go to the wall and maybe spend an hour, a couple of Saturday and Sunday and get 500 or 600 touches as
Yes.
compared to 20 touches they may normally get in a practice situation.
I agree. I agree with that.
You're a sort of an Eastern Canadian guy who ends up in Victoria. You moved at a relatively young age back to Victoria. Ice was not available. I'm guessing you probably would have been a hockey player growing up in the eastern part of the town.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about how the stick got your hand the first time.
Yeah, interesting story. We moved out west when I was 5.5, I believe, and didn't play a sport yet. Moved out west, and then finally, I was ready to play baseball. So the neighbor, Andrew Neville, I believe his name. Yeah, Andrew Neville was my neighbor. I was 6.5, almost turning 7 that summer. He was playing baseball already for a year, and he introduced me to baseball. He had an extra glove, gave it to me. We'd come home from school and just chuck the ball around, and I was excited. I'm like, oh, got my new glove, working it in, and excited to play baseball. My brother at the time was playing junior B lacrosse in Ontario, so he moved back when he was younger, 18 years old, 19, and played junior B for the Nepean in Ottawa. I don't know if you remember Nepean. So
I do.
He's actually pretty close to your age. He actually played Nepean for 2 years, had a job, I guess. That's how the story goes. I was young. He's 13 years older than me. He came back that summer just before my first baseball practice. He grabbed my glove and chucked it over this 9-foot fence in the backyard. And he handed me this heavy Logan box lacrosse wooden stick.
Okay.
I'm like, what do you want me to do with this? He said, this is a sport you're going to play. It's a tough sport. It's agile. There's a lot of movement, a lot of running. Baseball, you're standing too much. So I am going to come here. I'm meeting you here at this spot in the backyard every day when you come home from school, and we're going to learn how to play this sport. So to my brother Billy's credit, that's what got me into playing lacrosse.
What a great influence. You also played, and I just briefly, but you played semi-pro soccer. So was that sort of the off-season sport that became the fun sport?
You know what's funny? Yes. Lacrosse was always my first love since I started when I was 7. I picked up soccer a year later, so I started playing soccer. We lived in a town called Sydney, British Columbia, on the south tip of Victoria. we moved to Victoria, Saanich, and I was introduced to soccer. So my school mates, my classmates played soccer. They're all big soccer players, and they're like, try soccer. I started playing at recess time at school, and I'm like, I got to join. So I joined soccer. My first organization was called Gordon Head, which is a nice suburb of Victoria where we lived. And yeah, I started playing soccer, and it was a warm up. It was soccer started August. It went all the way through March. Then lacrosse picked up in April, box lacrosse, and that went all the way through the summer, to the end of August. So soccer was a warm up, lacrosse was the finish, my first love. But then I became pretty darn good at soccer. I was a striker, right wing. I was very quick, and I practiced just like any sport. We had a little park called Majestic Park behind our house. I brought a bunch of balls, two or three friends, started crossing balls, curling them, learning the system control factor. And I really, when I was probably 15, I was kind of like, I had a pretty good chance of going to college for maybe soccer. And then I got that call, which we'll talk about, going to Syracuse for lacrosse.
Well, obviously, the two guys in the picture behind me, the Gate brothers, obviously, you guys formed what arguably is the greatest attack that probably was ever played and never will play. I mean, there was some things, and I want to get into that. But you obviously had a great junior career. How did you get on Coach Simmons's? How did the mix? Because he's on one side of the world, you're on the other. And you had some familiarity with the Gate brothers being from that part of town anyway.
Well, that's it. The two guys behind you were the reason why I went to Syracuse, bar none. They were the guys. They went first. The story goes, Bobby Allen was a coach for Team Canada back, 78, 82. And he cut the gates at 86. So the gates basically are just right out of high school, and he had to cut them and kept the old timers like John Grant Sr. and all those guys. And Bobby Allen used to bring Team Canada to Syracuse to scrimmage the Syracuse team with Roy Simmons Jr., just to
Right.
learn the field game more, learn how to play field lacrosse, a real game. And he gave Simmons a tip saying, listen, coach, I had to cut these twins. You got to keep an eye on these guys. They're fast, they're big, and they're going to help you. They're going to help you here at Syracuse. So that's how the story went. So Simmons and Deska went out and watched them play in a box game in '86. I believe it was Coquitlam Minto Cup. Yeah, '86 was in Coquitlam, and I was on. I started playing with the Gates when I was back in '84. So I was 13, they were 14. They're a year older than me. So they took the Gates first. They went '87 in January, second semester. Um, they were not used to it, the cold, and people are like, we laugh about it. They're like, oh, well, they're from Canada, all the Americans on the Syracuse team, but we're like, we're in Victoria. It's moderate. It doesn't snow that much. And all the guys from Long Island, upstate, like they didn't believe us. Like Canada's Canada. You have snow all the time. And Gary and Paul were not in great shape, they told me. I wasn't there yet. So they went. Gary ended up making, I think, honorable mention All-American that first year, started scoring at the end. They were freshmen. It was unheard of as freshmen starting. They didn't
Right.
start their freshman year. Gary finally got some time the last few games into the playoffs, and he made his mark. And the story goes, him and Paul went to Simmons after their freshman year and said, Coach, we understand what this is. We see how important this NCAA Division I is to you and the Syracuse program. You're never going to lose a championship game again when we're here. And sure enough, he never lost another championship when they were there.
When was the first time you played field? How old were you?
I was 13, like I said, because Gary and Paul we had the Victoria Sea Spray organization, which was box lacrosse starting in 1980, I believe. That was kind of like an all-star team on the island. You grab some kids from Saanich, you grab some kids from Wandafuca, some Esquimalt kids, and you made an all-star team for Victoria that represented Victoria. And we would take that team over on the island and play against the Burnabys and New West, Coquitlams, Richmonds. So they played a year. So I never played with them until field lacrosse was formed in January. So in the wintertime, we started playing this house league. There was no league, there was no school. We'd play against each other, intermediate stuff. Then we would schedule a trip on the ferry to go over to Vancouver and play the Richmonds, the New West in club. It's only club, no school. That's how we started. So it started very small, and there was a men's team, with my brother, Kevin Alexander. Chris Hall was the orchestrator. He put that together. He was amazing for Victoria Lacrosse, and Kevin and my brother Billy were great, and they put Victoria on the map, and that was the early '80s, and that's how we started growing into field lacrosse.
Was Simmons brilliant because he was recruiting Canadian box players, or did he just end up with a couple of Gate brothers and then eventually you because you were just good lacrosse players?
No, he was brilliant picking us later on, we think, but he never really recruited Canadians. He had a bunch of Native American Indians from Onondaga,
Right.
the Bucktooths, and everybody in the world. So he stayed local mostly. He barely, very rarely got any Maryland guys until later on. He kept going upstate, downstate, mostly New York kids. The Gates were a phenomenon. He came in and sure enough, sophomore year, Gary's player of the year, scored 80 goals that year. Eric Gate came in 88. That's the start of the Eric Gate. He scored two that game against UPenn, and Roy Simmons looked at each other. They looked at him and Desker like, "Do you got any more of you at home?"
And then obviously the call goes out to you.
Yeah, so the call came out to me, I want to say after 80, after 87 into 88, the winter, like they're interested. So I had to take some courses, like some home courses to up my grades. I had to take the math, the English, science to get my grades up to get into Syracuse. Then they're like, you got to take this SAT. And I'm like, what's an SAT? Well, it's a study of, it's a test to get into colleges, and they score you on math and English, and you have to get a certain point. Back then it was only 750 you need to pass your SATs, and you don't study it. Canada, you never had it, that. And I had to go up island to take the test, and passed it, that's how it started. My brother was funny because he thought I had to take a test to understand field lacrosse more to get into Syracuse. He thought the SATs was a field lacrosse course, not
Right.
not academics.
We're talking to you from Pace Academy, where you're now employed.
Yeah.
And my question is, you've got a 27-year background in education, teaching in a variety of subjects. Did you know early on that you have an education degree from Syracuse? Did you know early on that's what you wanted to do is teach?
No, I didn't, Greg. I literally was like, I had to pick up some kind of diploma when I was at Syracuse. I took the kind of an easy way out, but it wasn't. I found out it was harder than people told me. I took political science, so a poli-sci major. I got my piece of paper, and from there I actually went to St. Joe's University and became a assistant coach, Division One. Then I started taking secondary education courses in grad school. Um, Only lasted one semester because I just got a job back in Baltimore from Philly. So I moved right away after 6 months and worked at a school called McDonough School. I was there for 2 years. Then I went on and worked at another school for 15 years, then another school for 7 years, but always in the education field, taught physical education from second grade all the way to 10th grade for all those years. It just happened because I wanted to coach. So I couldn't get a job at a school unless I taught. Obviously, I want to teach physical education. I didn't want to sit in a classroom with a tie on and the chalkboard scene. I wanted to
Right.
move around, and so that's how it started, just because I wanted to coach.
Okay. Well, four-time All-American in college and all the accolades. You're in the NCAA, the NIL, NLL, and as well as U.S. Lacrosse Hall of Fame. So sometimes people think that it's the Gate brothers. There's three of the best players that ever put it on the same line. But I think that's something that gets lost. One of the bar conversations I have all the time is I ask people, I said, you know what the national sport of Canada is? And everybody always says hockey. And it turns out it's lacrosse.
Yeah.
And that kind of gets lost in translation. But there's one stat, before we get into the specifics, there's one stat that as I'm looking through some things, as a field player in what was then the old club leagues to the MLL, you were 399 on goals and 374. You're a really balanced player on the field side. Yet on the NLL side, 187 in the MLL with 82 assists and 182 goals and 76 even at Syracuse when you played. For some reason, the NLL, you were this. How can you be such a great scorer outdoors and more balanced player indoors?
Indoors, because you get more touches, you get the second assist and like hockey, a lot of second assists. Like don't let them fool you with the stats. It's a lot of second assists. I pass to you, Greg. You pass to Gary Gate. He scores. That's an assist. Field lacrosse is not like that. Field lacrosse is different because even if I pass this to you in field lacrosse, I made a great move, beat my guy, passed to you, and you dodged one more time and stuck it in. Guess what? My assist gets wiped out. So it's so different. Canada, you can hit it off the boards after a pass, grab it, come in and score. You still get the assist. Completely different from field lacrosse, and the man up and everything. But in field lacrosse, I was more of a finisher, a shooter. I wasn't behind the cage as much until I got to my senior year at Syracuse. I was more of the wing player. I could feed, but I just took steps to shoot or just ran across, caught it, on the run and stuck it. So that's probably why the comparison, that the difference in the stats with field and box.
Do the three of you guys know how good you were at the time?
We kind of did because it's one for me. I always played with a chip on my shoulder. I wasn't vocally cocky, but like any good player, Greg, you got to be confident in your own mind that you could beat your guy anytime, you could score on any goalie anytime, and we never said it, but yeah, yeah, absolutely. We thought we were pretty good.
Towards the end of your career, there was this giant door opens, and all kinds of Canadians started, filtering into late '80s, '90s, and at the turn of the century. There's just you had to have a Canadian, you had to have that premise, and I think that certainly made a lot.
Yeah.
From college, you went to what was then the USCLA, became an all-star there. That was essentially the best play. It was the forerunner of the MLL, and it was compare the MLL and what when that league was. Was it as organized?
Yeah, the USCLA, it was a great club system, and all that's the only place to go after post college, and all the guys that made like the US teams played in that league. Baltimore obviously had an unbelievable league with all the best players from Hopkins and Virginia that moved to Baltimore essentially because Baltimore's still one of the biggest hotbeds in lacrosse. I moved to Baltimore and in Long Island obviously back then. So it was exciting. We had obviously we had fun. We had Friday night games under the lights. It was all in the spring. We'd play, 2 games a week, sometimes just one or two, and we'd have the kegs after the games and a barbecue grill going, and we just, we loved each other off the field, even with the guys we played against. We all got together, and it was just easy. There was no money exchange. There was nothing like that. No salaries. It was all for fun. It was all for pride. Who's best? Who's the best team in Baltimore? You win that division. Who's the best team in Long Island? You go play them. And that's how it was, when 1995, 6, 7, 8, 9, 2000. So I played 6 of those club years and some of the best moments. Like I played for Mount Washington. We won the whole thing. We beat Long Island surprisingly by a lot. And they had a star-studded team with Sal Lacasio, Vinny Sombrados, and an amazing team, all, U.S. players. And we beat them, I think, 18-7. Like it was amazing. So that was great. Then the MLL was formed in 2001.
Last year, we had a chance to interview a lot of the PLL Hall of Fame guys. So Jesse Hubbard and Canabini and all those guys that played in those leagues, Mark Millen. It was really fun talking to those guys because they remember that those club leagues is certainly organized and certainly terrific, but with a little less pressure of what may have become the NLL into the PLL. Because it was a bunch of guys who played in college, but it wasn't a pickup league. It was obviously very organized, but they have great memories, and obviously you can see your face light up a little bit when you get a chance to talk to about it because it was great lacrosse. It was kind of going back to the beginning.
I guess back in the day, Greg, before I moved to Baltimore, I want to say in the all in the 80s and 70s, that was the only show in town. People would drive from miles just to watch a good club lacrosse game. Mount Washington against Green Turtle, or Capital from DC against Mount Washington. So it was written up. I heard 2-page write-ups in the Baltimore Sun. So more than even college.
one of the great joys around here is that Warrior is located right here in Detroit.
Yep.
And on Thursdays over at Birmingham Seaholm, they turn the lights on for the guys at Warrior at 9:00. Throw your sticks in the middle. My son had played for Jamie Monroe at the University of Denver, so he goes over on Thursdays at a 37-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Just go and watch these guys. And there's literally nobody in the stands, right? Except for maybe a girlfriend and a wife. And to watch those guys play like it was back when they were in seventh grade, the smiles and all the other stuff that they're doing, everything is so organized now in lacrosse. If you're not on a travel team, the joy sometimes gets lost in those process. And watching these guys, and it's either the guys working for Warrior or all the Division I guys that live in the area, it's pretty damn good lacrosse. And to watch those guys just have the joy of playing is really fun to watch.
Yeah, yeah, you're right about the joy sometimes gets lost in the developed club system, and there's a lot of money that they can make as directors in these clubs, and unfortunately, there's a lot of kids that don't benefit from it, and sometimes quit. They don't get enough playing time, and you have to still win to be a good club. You don't want to be a losing club team because who joins that,
Was there ever a point when you went from the clubs to the MLL? There was ever a point you thought maybe this could develop enough? We know it didn't, but develop enough to be a professional lacrosse player. And I'm talking about not having to have a second job or endorsements or whatever comes with it. Did that ever come across your mind?
It didn't, Greg. I saw it from day one, and I always in the back of my mind had hopes that I would, because like I said, I always dreamed about being in the NHL, and I wish it got to that status in lacrosse. But day to day, you had to keep your job and work on that. And I just got the thrill. I had the thrill of still playing at a very high level for the Philadelphia Wings, playing in this old Spectrum in front of 18,000 standing room only fans, and that's what got me going. I made money, yes. I was probably the top three players in the league, but it wasn't a full salary you could live on. But it was fun though.
Was it like playing in Philadelphia? Those got some interesting fans there. And I'm a guy who remembers the Broad Street Bullies and Fred Shiro. So I remember a lot of those guys that played for that team. We played against in juniors, Bobby Clark, some of those guys. Those guys they're my age, so a little bit older. But playing in Philadelphia has got to be a whole nother animal.
It was great. It was awesome when you won, but they let you know when you lost. They let you know when they lost. And unfortunately, the Wings, Philadelphia's had some lot of losing seasons. So my last year was our last championship was 2001. And that's the last time the Wings have won it, which is ridiculous because I won four with them, 94, 95, 98, 2001, and that was it. That was it. No more wins, but there's so much more parity too. We have more teams in the league in the NLL than there was. It was just us, Buffalo Bandits, or Toronto Rock when I was there.
I have to ask. I always ask this question of guys who represented their countries. You played in 4 World Games. I'm going to remind you of 2006 in London, the hottest week of history of lacrosse, as far as I can remember, at Western Ontario. Putting on the colors and the Canadians, and you guys lost that first game, that 2006. You lost the first game on that Monday, or that maybe it was Sunday night, and then came back the following Sunday to win, and I think win pretty convincingly. My question is, what's it like pulling on the Maple Leaf? The same question obviously is asked about what it's like pulling on a USA jersey, but for you, I got to think that's a special opportunity.
Greg, it was. I watched going back to '85 Canada Cup, watching Gretzky to Lemieux score that big goal that everybody sees. I've always wanted to play for my country. A huge thrill. In 1990 was my first. I was just finished my sophomore year at Syracuse, and to play with my big brother Billy. So Billy was on that Team Canada team in Perth, Australia. We got shellacked, like you said, against the U.S. the first game, and the championship game we made it close. I think we only lost by 4 in the championship, and that was just the experience being over there in Australia and playing for Team Canada was exciting. And then again in '94 we played in Manchester, England. 98 was in Baltimore, and that was a very historic game that I'll never forget.
2006 in London, we had Nicky Polanco on the show, and Nicky is a big, obviously when you played against him. I said that the 6 minutes that Gary scored in the final stanza, he scored, I think, 4 or 5 in that final stanza, if I'm not mistaken, for you guys to win. I said that's the best of lacrosse I'd ever seen offensive player I'd ever seen in my life in that brief period. When the smoke had cleared, if you remember, we had those tents up on the south side. He was sitting in an ice bath because at that point he was, I think, 40 or 41 at that point. But you guys played. That's as good a lacrosse as I've ever seen played. And
yeah, you know what? It's funny for me. It was kind of like it was a different thought in my mind. Yes, we won the world championship, first time since '78. I was hurt. I literally sprained my hammy right before, maybe not right before, a month before the World Games. And I was playing well. I was old too. And I was playing well for the Bayhawks, feeling great. Just one day, just my hamstring gave on me in a hot summer night. I think I played against the Rochester Rattlers that game. And it took me 5 weeks, twice a day to rehab. And Frank Nielsen kept calling me, Tommy, are you okay to come? Are you okay to come? And I'm like, yes, nothing's going to stop me for freaking playing, especially losing in 98 and over to double overtime. Nothing's going to stop me for playing in 2006. And I got in there. Interesting story. I felt good. Dave Huntley, God bless his soul, one of my favorites. He looks at me after the first quarter. I didn't play because we're playing Japan. We're up already 7.
Those guys are fast.
What's that?
Those guys were fast.
Yeah, they were. So Dave looks at me. He goes, Tommy, you want to try? You want to try? I haven't played for 5.5 weeks. I'm like, yeah, I'll go out there. So I go out there. Within the first minute, caught a pass righty, came down, scored lefty. All right, I'm back. 5 minutes later, same thing. I came in. I think I got it, drove to the middle. I ripped one, top corner, 2 goals. I'm like, all right, here we go. I'm not kidding you, Greg. Within like 10 minutes after that, still in the second quarter, I believe, somebody took a shot. It might have been Grant or somebody took a shot, hit the pipe, redirected. And as an attackman, you got to chase it out. So I gave it a quick turn. Dink. My hammy gone again.
Yeah.
So that was game 1. The rest of the tournament, Greg, I'm with a clipboard, my nice Canadian golf shirt on, apparel, and I was out. So it was a bittersweet, but yes, I have the ring. We won the world championships, but I'm a competitor. I needed to start. I wanted to play.
My 16-year-old son still has John Grant's gloves with the palms cut out sitting on his mantle. It was given to him in the press room. But what I remember about that was so cool was Dave Huntley and Desco going back and forth on that Sunday. And Dave was a very gregarious kind of guy, didn't say it. And Desco is not exactly Jim Carrey. He's a very stoic-faced kind of guy. And Huntley was just needling the crap out of him. The more Gary was scoring, the more he was needling him. They're going to win on soil. I was in the tent. We were standing in the back part of the tent because we had press credentials. It was just a fun week. It was just a fun week.
It was.
I get that part of it. Just out of curiosity, are you a box guy by in your brain, or is field, or are they equally shared in terms of your own experience?
I'm a box guy. When you start something, play that long, it's box. I have the box mentality when I went to Syracuse, just finishing, the knack of finishing. I teach kids the right, form, how to hold the stick properly. Everything's overhand first. Don't ever try sidearm or underhand. Everything's overhand, 90-degree angle, most accurate shot in lacrosse. So I'm a box guy first, and I started getting pretty darn good at field lacrosse because that came from my soccer background into the open field. So soccer definitely made me a better field lacrosse player. And that was in my mind when I went to Syracuse, saying, oh, this is just like soccer. You got to move into open space. You have a lot of room. You're not getting cross-check in the back. You don't have wooden sticks. You just got to be smart with the ball, feed when you have to. So that's what made me a better field lacrosse player is the soccer years. Because I played soccer till I was 20, then I went to Syracuse.
There are a lot of guys masquerading about playing, coaching and clinicking with box when they're really teaching lacrosse in small spaces. Nothing wrong with that, getting a touch, and I understand that part. But there's a lot of guys that never played box that are trying to teach it. And just in your own mind, there's a huge difference in the concepts between box and field. It's catching and passing. I get it, but it's a horizontal game versus a vertical game. Is that a fair estimation?
That's a fair estimation, yes. Don't forget box lacrosse, especially the Canadians, they're used to passing in tight areas,
Right.
tight, confined areas. You show me a little stick, you're going to pass here. Americans are not like that. You got to
Right.
be wide open before they can actually feel confident to make that throw. Box Canadians use their wrists more, right, and their shoulders. Americans use their shoulders and turn their hips. So it's a different concept in shooting and passing American field lacrosse as opposed to Canadian box lacrosse. But you have to have the knack. You got to learn to catch a rebound off the boards and catch backwards. You know, if you get really good at field box lacrosse, it's all catching. You're catching in different tight areas, and that's how you become more adaptive field lacrosse. You can do anything if you get really good with your stick work.
And a junior coach, we always had to have a stick here, even when he was talking. You just had the stick here, just hold it
Yeah.
up, right, just above your. When I'm coaching today, I'm still up here. Kids are always, especially get the new freshmen in with the varsity team, and so we start line drills, and I start passing both hands
Yeah.
and start dropping dimes at my age, and they're kind of, how can this old guy? Well, it's what you learn, and it's the process, and I get all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about you're with Pace now. You were at IMG for a little while. Now you're at Pace. What's Talk a little bit about the education and how that in the private world that you're involved with. I think that'd be kind of cute, interesting to listen to.
Hey, I've been in independent schools, Greg, since I graduated college. You know, McDonough to the Glenelg Country, the Friends School of Baltimore, to another school, boarding school, to being a director at IMG. You know, being a director was a different role. It was an admin role, a business role, and I excelled at it. You know, I brought that place from nothing to something in the 5.5, 6 years I was there, and met a lot of good friends, recruited a lot of great families. So I got no, obviously hardships towards what I did at IMG Academy as a director. But I had this job came up, and somebody told me about Pace Academy. I'll be honest, I never heard of Pace Academy, and the only reason I am here is my son, who's a junior in high school. He plays for 3D Georgia. So 3D Georgia, the reason why when he lived in Florida, he didn't have a regular club team to play for. He played for a national club team called the Red Hots, and three of the kids that were on 3D Georgia were on that national team. Because you can still play on your regular club team and you can play on national teams in different circuits. They said, Kate, come play with us at 3D Georgia. And this is like a year and a half ago. So we love the experience with 3D Georgia. James Leary is the director there. He's been amazing with my son because right now my son's in that whole recruiting mode. This is his recruiting time. He had some great offers, but he's still waiting for that offer, the offer, he said. So, and that's the reason Pace Academy came up. And I read about it, talked to Chad, who's our athletic director, and Chad and I knew each other from way back when. He coached against me in Baltimore, small world, of course. Met the Fred Asaf, unbelievable headmaster here. He's been here 20 years. Fred's a Philly guy as well. He was at LaSalle High School. Knows Tony Resch, who coached me on the wings. So it just became a smaller world. And
Right.
Tony's one of my favorite coaches I've ever had. But the school itself is exciting because I love the people I work with, and I love the challenge. You know, not going to win states probably this year, but hopefully in a few years, 5, 6 years down the road, I just want these kids to have the best experience possible in lacrosse at Pace Academy. Huge academic school, the best in the area. So we're just right there outside of Atlanta in Buckhead. Gorgeous area, beautiful homes, great families. They just want me to help, make this experience great for all the kids that come to Pace Academy, and it's been great so far.
Is your son intact as well?
So I have two sons. I have a son who is a freshman at Robert Morris University, Division One, Pittsburgh, loving it, loving it, loving it, loving it, because they're Canadian mentality. I think he's got 9 Canadians on his team. They play box across there. They have their own rink. They have a hockey team. They play box. As a matter of fact, he's flirting with the idea of going back to Victoria this summer to playing for the Junior Shamrocks. So I have to make a few phone calls. He's never played box in his life, just fun fox. So yeah, so he's there, and the young one, we got away. We're like, you know what? We're out of Florida. IMG wasn't really happening for him. Didn't really, fit in. wasn't really developing the way we wanted him to develop.
Right.
So I made one little text call to my friend Brian Kelly at Calvert Hall, who's an amazing coach. Brian's been there 30 years, and it just happened that Calvert Hall won the whole MIAA, and they placed first in the whole nation in high school. So Brian's like, we would love Cade. Absolutely. Let's start talking. And this is in June.
Right.
So that's how that evolved. I have my wife's sister lives there. Brother-in-law lives in Maryland still. And that's why he's there. It was an easy fit for Cade. He's going to get great coaching now, and he's going to get a great pathway to where he needs to be.
We interviewed Brian Phipps last year, who's coaching high school in Baltimore. And he started talking about the shot clock. And I'm the secretary of the Michigan High School Lacrosse Coaches Association. We've been now trying to push the shot clock to make the game faster, a little bit quicker. And we're getting pushback, but it's done really well in Maryland. It's been phenomenal.
Yeah, shot clocks. Let's go. You know, I'll go back in '92 when we lost in double overtime to Princeton, and Tierney knew he didn't have the athletes to play with us.
Yeah.
Hey, he's a mastermind. Guess what? He won. That was his first championship in '92 against us. Just slowed the ball down. Most boring lacrosse ever, because he watched Princeton's basketball, and he took that knowledge and instilled it in his lacrosse program, and it worked. They won it in double overtime, and probably the game, Greg, I think about more than all the championship rings I have.
I have no doubts. Dom Starza lost two great defensemen, went to a 3-3, and nobody was playing zone at the time. And they won a national championship with two backups because they could at least play the area. And since it was a little bit like playing Georgia Tech football, you don't play against a wing T. You're used to playing a wide open, and they create problems. You play the service academies in football. They create problems because you don't practice against that kind of an offense or that kind of a defense, right? It changes the premise. Right. Well, listen, I've appreciated every minute you spent with us. This has been a really fun conversation. And thank you for all the things that you do. And congratulations on a great career. You know that better than I do. And thanks for spending some time with us.
Greg, thank you so much. This is fun. I haven't done one of these in a few months, so it's great. Hopefully you and I can cross paths together and maybe play some golf.
Some people judge a book by its cover, and if you're not what people are looking for, you're kind of like a reject.
At school, it feels like everyone's staring at me and I'm just kind of not really a person.
Sometimes I can't believe that you could be proud of me if I'm not proud of myself.
It just was hard today. Nobody was listening to me.
Think of our best times together. Let's do more of that.
You know, try to understand me more, and I'll try to do the same.
Listening is a form of love. Find ways to support your kids at sounditouttogether.org.
Welcome back. We're back with Bryce Brubaker at 313. The theme of this show is box lacrosse. We're going to spend a little time talking about box, and our Tom Marechek talked a little bit about the conversation. Chris Colin coming up after this. We'll talk to you about what you should get out of playing box, and it's a big thing now. But let's talk about equipment because it ain't the same. So let's start with helmets.
No, it definitely isn't the same. A lot of field players around here will go in with just their field equipment, and that's the easiest way to get hurt while playing box. Helmet, if you play hockey, you've seen this helmet before. This is basically a Bauer, but Cascade is all... let me restart that.
No, start with Bauer. Just pick it up. Start with the helmet right from the beginning.
Play with hockey, you're very familiar with this. This is basically a hockey helmet with a box cage on it. For cross checks, they'll be sliding up onto your neck. You don't want to be going to the boards either with a regular field helmet with your chin exposed.
So it's underneath all the way to wire so that you don't have to worry about like a normal plastic helmet would be, so we're not going to get worse.
You're not going to get a... So when you throw a cross check at the shoulder, it's going to slide up. This is going to stop you from getting hit in the neck. And then going into the boards too, you're going to have a rounder circumference on your helmet. You're not going to get chinned in the boards.
Cost of a helmet for box and cost of a helmet, are they comparable?
They're comparable. Actually, box helmet's a little bit cheaper since it's basically a hockey helmet with a different cage on it. You can get a brand new one for $200.
Okay. So I'm assuming that because you're running the boards, it's got all of the Noxie formula stuff to make sure that nobody gets hurt.
It's set up to get hit into the boards, which will happen.
All right. Now I see what look like rib cagers.
Yes.
Okay. Explain what those are.
So this is a box kidney pad, a little bit different than a field kidney pad. It has more protection on the spine. As you know, we're going back to the cross checks. And in box, you can set moving picks in the back. So people will be throwing cross checks into your back pretty constantly. So you'll need this to protect your back and protect your sides.
That's pretty thick plastic too.
Yes.
That's.
Yep.
Could you wear these for field?
Yeah, you could wear them for field.
Maybe too cumbersome?
We still see some attackmen wear them in field, and then some younger players will still wear the old kidney pads.
All right. I'm not even sure what those are.
These are the bicep pads. So again, with the cross check, you're going to get most of your cross checks in the upper arm. So this is going to protect you with a hard plate here, because with the field shoulder pads, they basically don't wear them like they used to. So
they don't make them. They've always made them with pads coming down, but maybe not very thick.
They barely wear them now in field.
Okay, so this is very much.
This is very hard. Yep.
And this just slips into any normal shoulder.
Yep. You can tie it on, or some of them have attachments where you can put it on a shoulder pad.
Okay.
Yep.
Just out of curiosity, what's the price point on these?
You're around $80.
Okay.
70, 80 bucks, and these are around 50 for a really good pair.
All right, and then obviously we've got a stick left.
Yeah, so here's the stick. This is the Gate Torque, which has been a famous box head forever, and this is one of their box alloy shafts. So this is going to stop against bends and breaks. A lot of the composites you use today are really light titanium shafts, will just snap when you're playing box. So this is going to withstand a lot of cross checks and a lot of punishment that you'll see playing the game.
Okay. Well, appreciate the time. If you're not sure, check it out. Look down below. You'll see all the information for 313. And appreciate the time.
Thank you, Greg.
Welcome back. This is the Team 91 Michigan Moment with Chris Colin, who's our director, former University of Detroit Mercy coach. Obviously, this entire show is about box lacrosse, or a good portion of it is about box lacrosse with Tom Marechek. Chris, tell us what you would, as a coach, explain to a parent what they should be expecting to get out of box lacrosse if they're field players.
Got it. I just want to take a quick moment and say I am not a box guy. I've done enough box in my life. I've been around enough box people. I can talk the talk, but I am not a box person, because I think there are some people that coach box in this world that don't really know it that well and can put you in a bad situation. We've got some great coaches. Chris Shevins does a great job. Coach Palmer at U of D is one of the best box coaches around. And we have our friend Ron Martinello, right? So we have some really great resources in the area that people can look to for great box coaching. I think sometimes it devolves around here into fighting. We don't want that. So what we really want is we want kids to, number one, have possession awareness, right? There's a shot clock in box. So you kind of have to move through. You're going to lose possession when the ball goes on the ground. So that possession awareness and tempo is such an important skill that you learn in lacrosse. So I know a few drills that teach that, but there's a ton of drills that teach that. So tempo, speed, and movement are what you need to be learning, not so much of the contact stuff. You're learning spacing in traffic. That's getting through the traffic and figuring out your situation of how you're playing offense, continually moving where there's traffic around, and getting yourself ready to go in a very tight space. With that said, in a tight space, you're also looking to be able to catch better, catch tougher passes, move better, be deceptive with your catching, and also with your passing and your shooting. So deceptive passing, deceptive shooting, deceptive catching are all things that box lacrosse is a great avenue to learn. So if you can keep the tempo high, if you can keep yourself deceptive, if you worry about your spacing in traffic, and you have coaches that can teach you that versus kind of, I think, the traditional contact and we're hitting each other and fighting like hockey, you're in a really good program.
Welcome back. We're talking with Mark Kester, who is the CEO of the Players NIL, and we're going to have a really fun conversation. You and I talked this afternoon for probably half an hour about the NIL and how it fits and all the rest of it. And we're going to try and give some of the folks in the lacrosse world here in the Midwest some real understanding of what the NIL is. And you're not soliciting services as much as you're giving education so that we understand a moving bullet. And I say a moving bullet because the rules have changed so much and there's been such a landscape. It's like trying to dance on thin ice. So at the end of this, hopefully you're going to give us a little bit of a primer so we have a better understanding of what we really have the opportunity for and walk away with some good information so that you can make better decisions about your own career and your own life. Is that a fair representation?
Yes, absolutely.
So where do we start? Name, image, and likeness is an acronym that gets a lot of either praise or gets a lot of slings and arrows. And I think you're in that position to maybe explain to us what it is and how we should understand it.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand the history. The history of sports in America has always been a pretty strict line between amateur and professional athletes. And the governing body of college athletics, NCAA, always decided that athletes that participate in college athletics should be amateurs, and probably for good reasons. And they had restrictions on the number of years you could play and transfer rules and things like that. Over time, though, actually starting in the 50s, athletes started questioning the governing body, the NCAA, and their control. And through a series of lawsuits over many years, every one of which the NCAA lost, finally in 2021, they gave up and raised their hands and said, okay, you guys figure it out. And it had been coming a long time. Actually, the first time that we ever sent professional athletes to the Olympics was the 1992 Barcelona games and the original Dream Team. And before that, we had never sent professionals to the Olympics. Now it's very commonplace. But beginning July 1st, 2021, the NCAA removed all restrictions on athletes monetizing their name, image, and likeness, and being allowed to remain eligible for the college athletic program.
I think if you look all the way back, and I think of the guy that started the sort of the downhill slide for those kinds of things. Don Canham made a comment in 1972. He wanted to get rid of band day because the very first football game at Michigan, they would bring in something like 25,000 people from high school students who were banned, put them in the stands. But he recognized as the ticket prices were getting closer to $10 that he had 100,000 seats and wanted the $1 million gate. That was the threshold for athletic directors in those days. And he didn't count the beard. He didn't count all the other stuff that they sold. But that statement was on the front page of Sports Illustrated, and it really kind of changed the thinking. It was sport wasn't a business until he made that comment, in my mind. And once that comment was made, athletic directors no longer worried about making sure the jocks were washed and the buses were on time. They had to worry about whether or not they had an accounting degree. And I think that's a real truism. And then forward 30 years, and you see universities making big money, and poor guys that there's always been an underground trail that the star athletes got paid somehow. I don't think that's a secret from from John Wooden to the best players, but we finally have legalized it. So the question becomes, again, we've got a negative attitude about NIL, and we've got a positive attitude because should we allow 17 and 18-year-olds to have that kind of decision making over the kinds of money that's available? That being the case, how do you educate my son who may or may not be interested in going to college?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to understand the current landscape in college athletics. And as we discussed earlier today, I define it as two different buckets, the 2% bucket and the 98% bucket. I think most people can understand the 2% bucket. It's Power 4 football, men's and women's basketball. We're starting to see volleyball and baseball creep into that. But it's really, since July 1st, 2021, been dominated by three things, Greg, none of which are name, image, and likeness. They've been dominated by pay-for-play models, come to my school and I'll pay you. Transfer portal chaos, another thing that the NCAA did not do us any favors with.
No.
And collective payments. And collective is a term that's used to really, it's a booster club on steroids, right? And none of that has to do with name, image, and likeness. No one cares about their social media. No one cares about their community service. Probably don't even care about their grades. They just care, can they help them win games? Can they run fast and jump high? So most people, if you walk down the street and ask 25 people, what do you think about name, image, and likeness? They're going to tell you about the 2%. And they're going to tell you how it's impacted, their life as a fan, their life as a student athlete, whatever it may be. I'm focused on the 98%, those kids that are not getting paid gratuitously, but with this background, in my opinion, athletes have never been celebrated at a higher level than they are today, right? Society just loves sports. And with the proliferation of social media, we know more about our athletes than we ever have. Think about this statistic. In the 2024 Paris Olympics, in 16 days, the athletes from around the world generated 23.5 billion minutes of social content in 16 days. All right? Why? Because we want to know what our athletes are doing. We want to know what it's like to be them, where they eat, where they sleep, who they hang out with, how do they exercise, how do they rehab. And social media has given us access that we've never had before. Of course, we all love Jim Brown, and I grew up in New York. I love Joe Namath. But, we've had to read about them on the back page of the paper once a week. Now it's instantaneous. We know when they walk in the stadium. We know when they leave. We know what they say on the sidelines. And so using this platform that athletes enjoy today and focusing on the 98% is what I do. And the number one rule and the number one pillar in our company is, how do you use athletics to better your life? And that's what we try to teach.
When we had our conversation this afternoon, I've been a long-standing critic of the outside of sports that tries to find their way in and lies to kids. The agents, the club program coaches, and so on and so forth. Think of AAU basketball. There's no more reasonably corrupt landscape than some of those things. Then I also recognize, as an old guy who has to rethink some things, if I think of an influencer, I first think of Kardashian, right? That's not fair to the influencers who actually have power, opportunity, and influence. That really does matter. So if you're going to be in a world of social media, as you point out, that generates billions of minutes of time, I can't think of what it was like when Hoover was the president. I got to think of today's standard. So if you're going to use the medium that we're all using, even for an old guy like me, then I think it should be used responsibly. And somebody like you can provide that information, because there's always going to be, on both ends of the spectrum, there's going to be, you think of Shadur Sanders, you think of some of the things that where NIL gets its bad reputation, we're going to send a letter. But that was true when Meg Ditka was arguing with George Hallis about a $500 raise for a contract, and Hallis sat him down on a chair, and the year before he was the best player in football as the MVP, and he played 3 minutes of Dick Butkus's bad plays. He says, you don't deserve $500, and he signed for the $14,000. So I get that there has to be a balance between ownership and the rest of it. So now that I've understood that, and I want to become smarter about my choices, I call somebody like you, or I get involved with somebody that has the educational background, because you have an education degree from Hillsdale.
Correct.
So I know that maybe your parents were teachers. You mentioned that earlier. So we always think of everybody that has the negative, they're always looking for a dollar, but education costs. You can't do it for free. So what's the first thing you're going to help me with as a student athlete to understand the current landscape, and how do I benefit from that so I have more information to make better choices for my life?
First of all, I agree with you. The Kardashians changed the world forever. Influencer marketing is here to stay. And I don't care if you're General Motors or the local pizza shop and everyone in between. Exactly. They're using influencers and social media to connect with an audience. So that's just the way of the marketing world, okay? Right. But, think about how the internet changed the world, right? And think about, I'm old enough that my first job was I worked on a telex machine sending messages to another factory, right? So I built a program called Unlocking Influence. And the pitch is that we're going to help you unlock the influence that you have as an athlete, as a coach, as a parent, as an administrator. Unlock the influence that you have over your future. And the answer to the question about how I start every conversation with young people today is I ask them what success looks like to them. Not where you're going this weekend, not even where Thanksgiving is, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. As best as you can, look out as far as you can. Where do you want to live? What kind of life do you want to live? Do you want to have a family, cars, house? In Michigan, do you want a house up north on the lake? Do you want to go to Naples, Florida in the winter? What is it that you want to do? And then what are the milestones that you need to achieve to get there? And in this conversation, let's talk about high school athletes. Probably one of those milestones is you got to get to college, right? Because to be really successful, you probably got to go to college. Now, I understand that the world's changed in that area too, but in general, college educated people have a higher success rate than non-educated people. So as a sophomore, junior, senior in high school, one of those first milestones is you got to get to college. Okay, how do I do that? Well, my principle is, how do you use athletics to better your life? If you're a high school athlete in Michigan and you dream of going to college, how can you use athletics to get to a school academically that you may not have been able to get to without the support of athletics? And so that's how we begin the conversation. And then we actually create a roadmap to what success looks like to them individually.
I think of something as simple as the NCAA clearinghouse. I will talk to my athletes halfway through their senior year and they said, "Oh my gosh, coach, I've got to fill out all this information." We'd had 2 or 3 conversations as freshmen, sophomores, and juniors about what they should expect by the time they get to be seniors, and they forget about it. So that we understand that they're not listening a lot of the time. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, you're talking about the 98%, not that 2% that sort of takes the big money. And the other thing we should talk about briefly is that there's a huge difference between football, basketball, and maybe hockey, and maybe what would be considered secondary sports like soccer, baseball, softball, lacrosse. Certainly, they don't have as much money. The Ohio State lacrosse team doesn't have as much money as the football program. Proportionately, they do, but not in the terms of being able to give it. But here's the point. Should we look at the influence and opportunity? Not everybody's, God did not create all equal athletes equally. They just didn't. If they did, I would have hair and that would be, we go kind of another direction. But my point is, should I have a realistic understanding as I'm going through this process that I might not be a celebrated quarterback like Michigan signed through Oracle, that the kid that's now playing at Michigan, he's got a $2 million rollout before he's, graduates from Belleville. My point to that is that you got to have some reasonable understanding of the premise that you're not going to get the kind of money that might be available. Is that also kind of important to understand?
Yeah, so I always love to answer those questions because I have the facts. So here's the facts. In the first half of 2025, this is according to the NCAA dashboard, NIL dashboard. The first 6 months of 2025, the median NIL deal, median means half the deals are greater, half the deals were less. The median NIL deal was $55, right? And that includes all the Power 4 football guys that you just mentioned, right? Here's the second statistic. Hello world, wake up now. 62% of all NIL deals are under $100.
Wow.
So there's a misconception.
Right.
The reality of NIL has been hijacked by the 2%. And every parent saying, "Oh my gosh, little Johnny and little Sally are going to make millions when they go to play soccer at division, mid-major Division I school." No, it's not going to happen that way. It's not going to happen, right? And so I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I always love to state those statistics because it wakes people up.
Is part of your training to have them understand that they really have to be a presence on the internet, TikTok, Instagram? Is that part of the premise, or are we selling ourselves as athletes in a different way?
Well, think about the rhetorical question that I asked. What does success look like to you, right? And everyone in the world has the opportunity to turn NIL into a financial gain. That's what we're allowed to do in 40 plus states now in high school, as a matter of fact, right? Not everybody wants to do that. Not everyone's a social media influencer. Not everyone's comfortable doing that. But we teach 3 things. How do you build a personal brand? And we define brand as, what do people say about you when you're not in the room? All right. So what do your teammates think of you? What does your coach think of you? What do the fans think of you when you come off the sideline and throw your helmet on the ground? Right? What do the college coaches think of you with your attitude and your performance on the field and your grades, your social media content that may not be, kosher, right? Those are personal brand things, but none of that has to do with being a social influencer. It just means building a personal brand. The second part is tell your story. So now you're a high school athlete in the state of Michigan. You're hoping to play sports in college at whatever level it is. You need to call that coach, email that coach, go visit that coach, introduce yourself to that coach. Who are you? What are you interested in? What are your values? What is your brand, right? And then networking. And how do you build a network? Let's talk about recruiting, because that's your audience. When my kids were going through this, we were unknowns in an unknown high school lacrosse program. My oldest son, the first year we had varsity lacrosse was a sophomore in high school. and he had dreams of playing Division I lacrosse. So what did we do? In our junior year, and the recruiting cycle change was different, but in his junior year, we got in the car and went on a road trip. We introduced ourselves to 11 coaches. We said, hey, this is who we are. This is what we're doing. We'd like you to come see us play next summer. And, you gotta communicate. You gotta network. And so NIL has just waken us up to the opportunity that athletes have, but it's also taught us those 3 important skills that you need to master. And parents need to help the kids do that as well.
Persistence is a skill that's been put on the sidelines, and it's a skill that you should have. And sometimes it may come off as being a pain in the ass or you bugger or whatever the term you might mean. But it's part of that same persistence is we teach our kids all the time about if you're not willing to succeed, you have to learn how to fail first, which is the whole premise. We have an interview that we did earlier for one of our football programs. They missed it by a percentage and they lost the last game against a poor team, and the team that they'd beaten lost to a very good team. So the points put the other team in place. And I kind of pointed out to the coach, I said, isn't one of the lessons in high school sports, interscholastic high school sports, isn't one of the lessons disappointment? Well, nobody wants to hear that word, but that's kind of what you're suggesting, is that it's a circle that you have to teach them so that they really understand it. And I think that's something that's really important.
Well, I think in the recruiting world, what I've advised hundreds of kids in how to try and create opportunities at college for a long time now. And I always tell the parents, big school, small school, city school, country school, create a list of at least 20 schools and visit as many of them as you can. And while you're there, tell your story and find out if it's a fit. Now, of course, there's an athletic ability that, if you're a D3 athlete, probably not going to play D1. And look, let's talk about the big sports. I've worked with professional athletes for the last 20 years. When a professional football player walks in the room, he's different.
Yeah.
And you could be 5'9" and have all the heart in the world. You're probably not going to make the NFL. You might, but you're probably not. No. Or if you're not 6'10", and I tell people the truth, I loved basketball in high school. It was my favorite sport. I played it all the time. But I was a 6'4" white guy that couldn't dunk. And so I became a Division II tight end at Hillsdale College. That just was my reality. But you know what? I still used athletics to better my life. I went to a great school. I got a scholarship, met the best friends of my life. We're going to go to have a fun event this weekend with a bunch of them in Michigan. It's about what your priorities are and what success looks like to you. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people chirping in kids' ears about what success looks like, and some of them give them poor information, bad information.
My wife was the director of travel for the Pistons, and they were right across the street from where we are now. The facility's no longer there. And the great Larry Brown was a coach for a while, and I was a college and high school basketball official. So I would go over and officiate some of the scrimmages. And I had a chance to sit and got to know Larry a little bit. And I said, Mr. Brown, and you felt like you had to call him, and I was older than him, but you felt like you had to call him Mr. Brown. I said, how is it that a lot of people in this league don't like you, but they seem to want to play for you? And he said something really interesting, which goes back to what you're suggesting. He said, I'm not the most well-liked guy in town, but he says, I'm the most respected I know. And he says, the reasons they want to come to me is because I teach them to be better basketball players. And he says, you know what the value is of a professional athlete? And I said, talent. He said, no, consistency. We want to draft people that can be consistent on the same numbers every night, and then we plug that into a team that makes a difference. He said, if you can score 17 points a game, 4 assists, and a couple of rebounds, he says, that may not be NBA all-star numbers, but if that's the second guard on your team, he's going to start every game because he knows exactly what to get out of that guy. And he says, I teach kids how to be persistent and be, more importantly, consistent. And that kind of goes back to what you're saying. If you know the understanding of what the landscape is, you're a much better, you're an easier sold product than if you don't know.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no. Larry Brown was a great coach. He coached a lot of teams. He wore his welcome out, but he was a great coach, and no question about it.
So I've got this opportunity. Before I get too much farther, you have 3 sons that all played Division I lacrosse, Hopkins, Duke, and Hofstra. So yes. Your youngest, who went to Hofstra? Your youngest son?
Yes.
I'm assuming he played for Seth Tierney.
Yes.
That was an interesting, I'm sure you learned some things in that relationship in terms of it. But here's the point. Did you work, a lot of this stuff come out of those experiences? Because you also had a daughter that was a ski racer. Did a lot of this come out of the experiences you had with your own kids?
Of course. Yeah. I've lived the whole full life, high school athlete, college athlete, parent of athletes. Seth Tierney actually recruited my oldest son to Johns Hopkins, so I knew Coach Tierney. And then when he went to Hofstra, he recruited Coleman, my youngest. Interesting side note, there was 1 year difference between my oldest and my next oldest son. In 05 and 07, older brother beat younger brother. Hopkins beat Duke in the national championship both years.
Yeah, we were at both of those games. Should point out that your oldest son is an associate head coach at Hopkins as we speak.
Yes.
And he's obviously, you guys are connected in all kinds of ways. The question I wanted to ask in learning all that information, so now I'm interested, and right below your name is your website name, right under this. I'll do the editing and the chronology of all of the graphics tomorrow, but what I wanted to ask is, it's about $149 for your services. Am I correct?
About $149.
And what's the time frame on that $149? How much do you get a basic? Give me an understanding of what we're purchasing.
So I've written a digital toolbox that's a complete guide to building an NIL brand. It's 100 slides long. It goes through the 5 pillars of NIL education: digital marketing, influencer relations, how do you talk to brands? There's a legal, tax, and compliance section. What is intellectual property? What are lifetime rights? So that if you're a high school athlete and parents that may not know about contracts, at least you know the right words to ask your advisor. Community service and philanthropy, very important to me, a great way to build a brand. You're involved with philanthropy, so you understand that, and financial literacy. And it is a how-to guide of how to build a brand and create an NIL brand. So you get access to that digital content. Then you get 3 30-minute one-on-one Zoom calls like this, where we walk through what does success look like to you. We create a roadmap, and we empower you to build your brand, tell your story, and network.
With all the coaches we interview, and it's a lot for all of the shows that we do, the one sort of thread that goes between all the coaches is that kids that come in prepared and kids that come in understanding the landscape have a much greater respect. And if you're down to, let's just say you're that marginal athlete and there's one spot left on the team and there's 3 of you, the kid who's got his brains prepared is getting the opportunity. It doesn't matter if the other guy's 6'4" and you're 5'9", because again, we go back to the Larry Brown story. It's consistency, knowing that kid will be ready and you can trust him. And I think that's something that every young student athlete should at least have an understanding for. So listen, I really appreciate the time we've talked. You had a chance to change my mindset. I've always had this negative idea. And then when we started thinking, I drove home thinking, I really have my head up the wrong spot, because if that's the way the world is, I think of my grandma's statement. He says, you drive a car. Well, when I was a kid, I would drove a horse. So the wave is coming and you got to get on and surf or drown. I think that's kind of the point. So you really had a change in my mindset with this. And I really appreciate that. It's great information. So hopefully
I'll just leave you with this last nugget, right? We're trying to change lives. That's our mission, right? Using athletics to better your life. And then the second principle is, how do you use athletics to better the lives of the people around you? And you've done a lot of great work, Greg, I'm sorry. And, my hat's off to you and all the kids that you've influenced. But think about this. Let's not think of NIL as a 4-year transactional mindset. Let's think of it as a 40-year transformative mindset. How can we use athletics to better your life? And what does success look like down the road? And let's build a roadmap to that.
Yeah, I appreciate that a bunch. Best of luck. Hopefully you have a great winter, and hopefully our paths will cross it one of these days.
You got it. Thank you very much.